Last time we watched AI trip up on a simple bash script for DevOps. Today, let's see what happens when you ask an AI to write your Docker file. Could a single copy paste leave your production app exposed or broken? Let's find out live. If you are new here, I am running a local AI assistant, so all the code you are about to see comes straight from my own machine using a simple Python script to send prompts and get code back from the LLM. No editing, no cherry picking. I'll take exactly what the AI gives and show you line by line. If you can actually trust it for your own Docker builds. Here's the Python script I'm using. It just asks for my prompt, sends it to the local AI model, and prints out the result. Super simple, super transparent. Alright, let's get started. First, I'm going to run the Python script, chat with mistral.py. Now I'm going to provide the prompt. Write a Docker file for a Node.js app. The app uses server.javascript and installs dependencies with npm. Let's see what the AI comes up with. Press enter. Okay, here's the Docker file that AI gave me. Let's walk through it step by step. Before doing that, I'm going to copy this into a file real quick. Let's copy the whole thing. I will create a Docker file real quick and I'm going to paste it here. So if we look at this, I will try to remove this line and also this one. Okay, let's walk through this Docker file together line by line and see what it's doing and where it might trip you up in production. It's starting with the official Node.js 14 image. That's stable, but already we have a potential issue. Node 14 is no longer the current LTS version, and using outdated images could expose you to security vulnerabilities. Always check if there's a newer supported version you should be using. Sets the working directory inside the container. This is good. It keeps things organized. This line copies over your package.json before installing dependencies. This is a best practice. It lets Docker cache your dependencies if your code hasn't changed. npm install to fetch your dependencies. This is totally standard for Node.js, but notice it installs everything, including dev dependencies. In production, you typically want just what you need to run your app, not tools for testing or local development. Copy command. Now this is a classic works on my machine step. It copies everything from your current directory into the container, including files you might not want there, like .env files, test data, or even your entire .git directory. This is a security risk and can make your images unnecessarily huge. Expose 8080. On Docker knows which port your app listens on. If your app really runs on 8080, great. But if not, this needs to match your actual server configuration. And finally, it sets the default command to npm start, which launches your app. This is pretty typical for a Node.js Docker file. At first glance, decent, but for real world deployments, there are some hidden dangers and missing best practices. First, using Node 14 may mean missing out on the latest features, performance improvements, and most importantly, security updates. Second, copying everything into your image means you could accidentally include sensitive files, development notes, credentials, or huge directories like node modules. Third, there's no dockerignore file. So Docker will blindly copy everything unless you explicitly tell it not to. Fourth, the container runs as root by default. So if there is ever a security issue in your app, an attacker could potentially get root access inside your container. Fifth, I don't see any separation of development and production dependencies. So your images could be bloated with tools you'll never use in production. Sixth, no health check. So if your app crashes, Docker has no way to detect it or restart the container. And finally, for more complex applications, you would want to use multi-stage builds to keep your final image as small and secure as possible. Let's walk through the exact steps I take to fix this Docker file and make it safe for production. First, create a .dockerignore file. This is a huge deal. It tells Docker what not to include when building this image. Here is a simple example. With this in place, you'll keep secrets, giant folders, Git history out of your image, reducing risk and image size. By default, Docker runs your app as root, which is dangerous. Let's fix that by adding a user after installing dependencies. By default, Docker runs your app as root, which is dangerous. Let's fix that by adding a user after installing dependencies. Now your Docker will run as app user. This way, even if someone exploit your app, they are not getting root access in your container. Swap Node 14 for a supported and slimmer image. For example, Node 18 Slim. This reduces your image size and attack surface. Always use the latest LTS version that your application supports. Install only production dependencies in your final image. For that, you could use a multi-stage build, or for smaller projects, just run npm ci hyphen hyphen only is equal to production. This installs only what you need to run the app, nothing else. Let's add a health check so Docker can tell if your app is actually running and restart it if not. Now Docker will ping every 30 seconds. If it's not responding, it knows something's wrong. For larger applications, consider a multi-stage build to keep only production files and dependencies in your final image. Here's an example of multi-stage builds. So, can you test AI with your Docker files? Not blindly. The AI gives you a starting point, but it skips critical best practices like using supported images, ignoring secrets, running as a safe user, and monitoring your app's health. Remember, always review any AI generated code like you would code from a stranger, because a tiny mistake can turn into a huge security risk in production. If you found this useful, hit subscribe for more real world DevOps breakdowns. Drop a comment with your own AI generated horror stories and let me know what you want to see next. And if you thought this was risky, just wait for the next episode because I am going to let AI write my Terraform code for real cloud resources. Will it accidentally open up your cloud to the entire internet? You'll want to see what happens. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.